It's so interesting when you talk about knowing one opinion that a person holds, and from that one opinion being able to accurately predict everything else that they believe.
Yeah.
That mono-thinking just proves that you're not a serious thinker.
Well, I just think it's fairly obvious if, for instance, you say, yeah, what's the problem with a big bearded guy winning the women's weightlifting? I go, okay, I know all of your other opinions as well. And to be fair, that probably works the other way around as well, to a great extent. The interesting thing with most people is where they're slightly out of sorts with their own political side.
Well, that's exactly the point, that if it's been a long time since you were surprised by the opinion of your favorite thinker or writer or commentator or whatever it is, that's probably a reliable signal that they're not really thinking for themselves.
Yeah.
If you're just permanently, oh yeah, it's like an old leather pair of shoes. Here we go again. The COVID things happened and I can already predict such and such's opinion on it. You go, every single time, all of the time, every single time, you know the idiosyncrasies of this person's very, very particular worldview. Well, that's because it's not theirs.
Yeah, of course.
It's everybody else's. It's outsourced thinking.
And what's really sad about that is that it means that you're not really living your life. I mean, you're living a pastiche of a prescribed set of opinions. That's so sad. I mean, it's so sad. The wasted energies and wasted lives of people who've just downloaded a set of opinions and they're just running them. Yeah, well, that's not your life. It's just someone else's life. You're just replaying.
What was that quote you told me about being shunted to the side of the road of your own?
It's a Philip Larkin quote from a poem of his. Yes, it's a description of a couple, and he says that something is pushing them to the side of their own lives. It's a beautiful line. Terrifying line, horrifying line. It should make everyone judge for themselves.
What does it mean to you?
Oh, well, it means that there's a life that you hoped to live, a life you saw yourself living, and you got pushed to the side of it and ended up not living that life. I think a large number of people have that. Almost all unhappy people I've met have that feeling to some extent. And then you've got a choice of poisons, one of which is to choose the poison of other people held me back. Another is to face up to the fact that you were in some way a coward or a victim of circumstance or something else. But I think one thing that young people, can be encouraged to do is to set out the sort of life they would like to live, imagine the sort of life they would like to live, and then aim for it. And working it out is sometimes difficult, sometimes not. But if you do have that image of your life as you think it should be lived, and you end up not living it, that is, particularly if you can feel yourself slowly being pushed away from it, I think that's a terrible, terrible feeling.
It's like watching your own demise occur second by second.
Yeah. Fortunately, I've never felt it, but I definitely fear it.
Where do you go to find, or to avoid cowardice, or to find resilience or bravery? Because a lot of the time, the easier path is easier, and it's the one that's got the least resistance. And
surround yourself with courageous people. Surround yourself with brave people, and that can be bravery of all sorts of different kinds. And when I turned 40, I had a dinner, which I think you weren't invited to, but it's only because you weren't in town, if I remember rightly. But I did get a lot of my favorite people in the room, at least, and it was interesting that a friend made a speech in which he said, it's striking, I won't say the names of the people around the table, but some of whom will be familiar to listeners, but a friend of mine gave a very touching speech I was very moved by, in which he said how noticeable it was that Douglas has surrounded himself with courageous people. And it was from a very wide array of bits of the world and different disciplines and so on. And I was really touched by that because I hadn't particularly noticed that I'd done it. But then I realized I sort of had. That actually, yes, I must have subconsciously, but maybe now consciously, wanted to be around courageous people, because I think that courage is something that rubs off on other people. I think it's enormously to be desired to be around courageous people. And that might be different types of courage, some of it physical, some of it mental. So that's one thing. Yeah, surround yourself with courageous people, or at least not cowards, not cretins, not the sort of people who just say the same things that everyone's meant to say and so on. There's many ways people can get out of this non-life that they are being shunted into.
One of my friends he wasn't a friend at the time. I'd just met him for the first time, but someone that I'd been interested in for a good while. I met in Austin a while ago, and he'd had an interesting story, and he'd faced a cancellation over the last few years. And he sort of told me the story, and he said he was sat on some rooftop late at night talking about this thing, and he was regaling me with the story. He said, throughout my entire life, I thought I was a hard man. I like to do man things and surround myself with masculine people, and I was into, like guns and shooting and fitness and friends with Navy SEALs and all the rest of it. He said, my entire life I was scared that I was a coward. I was terrified that I was a coward. And he said, in my darker moments, I could always hear my better self clearing his throat in the room next door.
Beautiful.
And then this cancellation thing came along. And he said, even the people that do really hard things, hard intellectual work, hard training work, hard physical work, all the rest of it, there's a difference in the kind of difficulty that they do because it's elected, right? You've chosen to do the hard workout.
Yeah.
But when the entire world comes to bear on you in a way that feels like chaos and catastrophe whipped up into a whirlwind. And he said, that was a genuine test. And he was very grateful. He said my better self stopped his coughing and kicked the door in and came to help.
Good.
I could always hear my better self clearing his throat in the room next door.
Well, the thing with that is the difference between situations you find yourself in that are dangerous through choice and ones that you've been thrust into. Yeah, been thrust into, and you probably know that the consequence of being thrust into dangerous situations is much more likely to lead to PTSD and things like that than if you choose to. I've been fortunate in my life. Most of the dangerous situations I've been in have been ones I've chosen to be in, and that's very different. But yes, I'm glad he found out that he was more courageous than he feared.
But think about that. What a beautiful line. To be more courageous than you feared you were. Right? This war against yourself.
Yes, that's
this
right.
fear of your own nature.
Well, it's perfectly sensible. I mean, there's a horrible example I sometimes use, but I mean, if you're ever mugged for your wallet, let alone you were mugged with somebody else, let alone if you were mugged with a girl that you were with or looking after, and you just handed it over. There's several reasons that it's worth handing over the wallet for. One of which is why do I need to risk getting shot for
stabbed
for $100 and a
few phone calls to the bank?
Yeah. So that's the reason to hand over the wallet. Oh, what I care. The reason not to hand over the wallet is, are you sure that you're not going to spend the succeeding weeks dreaming dreams of pornographic violence against your attacker and thinking of how you would torture him if you could get your hands on him, and the brutal way in which you would have revenge if you ever find him?
It might be easier to just get your head kicked in a bit.
Yes. And are you sure you can live with the version of yourself that is you handing over the wallet? I said this recently in a piece in New York Post about the people on the New York subway, where there's this awful thing you've probably seen where people, like a woman will be being abused by some maniac, fentanyl-addled, drug addict. And people will either look into their phones, including men, or they will get their phones up and record. And I mean, somebody said Douglas is trying to get people killed, and I wasn't, obviously, but what I was saying was, where are the men? Just stand up and confront the guy if he's got a woman by her hair and is parading her around the carriage. And yeah, the backlash was what do you know? These people might get killed if they step in. But I say, yeah, but also maybe we'll have a more civil society if people don't think they can go around and do this stuff without consequence. I'd like to see far more standing up like that. I think it's a pathetic position, particularly for men to be in, to sit there getting out their mobile phones. But, it's everyone's choice. I don't exactly know what I would do in some of the situations I've seen, read about on the New York subway.
In other news, this episode is brought to you by Maui Nui Venison. Maui Nui Venison brings the healthiest red meat on the planet direct to your door. Not only is it the most nutrient-dense meat on the planet, they're the only 100% stress-free, wild-harvested venison that you can get. Here's my super secret hack. If you are sick of buying meat that always goes off, put it in the freezer, from frozen, salt both sides of it, put it in an air fryer for 10 to 12 minutes each side, and you have a perfectly cooked steak from frozen that will never go off because it's going from freezer to mouth in the space of 25 minutes. It's a complete game changer. All of their cuts are spectacular and you can get them frozen delivered to your door, but their venison sticks are my favorite while I've been on the road. You can get the healthiest red meat on the planet delivered directly to your door and get 20% off by going to the link in the description below or heading to mauinuivenison.com/modernwisdom and using the code modernwisdom at checkout. That's MAUINUI venison.com/modernwisdom and modernwisdom at checkout. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip with Douglas, you will love the 2-hour-long podcast episode, which you can watch right here. Go on.